Hello, Mike. T-9 here. The weather is absolutely perfect, no problems at all. And so far, the countdown has been all but flawless. The computers have now all come online. They all work. And when they learnt that, over in ground control, or launch control, I should say, there were very loud cheers. There is a rumour buzzing around the Cape at the moment, by the way, that the Russians are about to put up a spaceship themselves in a bid to steal Columbia's thunder. As you said, today is the 20th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight, the first ever man in space. Now, this is nothing more than a rumour. It may well be mild paranoia, things being as they are. It is, after all, nearly 4 p.m. in central Russia where they launched their spacecraft, and that's very, very late to put anything up. Somewhat unlikely, I think, but, well, who knows?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We can't confirm here in Britain that the Russians plan any activity, but obviously if we get reports of that, you will be the first to hear. For now, we can report that the first test launch of the much-delayed American shuttle is still on the cards for a little over 7 minutes from now. And of course, for the second time in 48 hours, that means the two-man crew, 50-year-old Commander John Young and his 43-year-old pilot, Bob Crippen, the one closest to the camera in this shot, will be back in the cockpit of Columbia, waiting for an experience neither they nor their machine have ever been through before. Let's look now at the pictures we received on Friday evening when we saw these two men who, having spent 5 hours in the spacecraft, emerged exactly where they went in.
This is Shuttle Launch Control. Astronaut Bob Crippen has just emerged from the hatch in the orbiter, the first of the 2 prime crew members to leave the orbiter.
So, Ripardo, can a man stand up to those sort of circumstances with ease?
Well, he can, not necessarily with ease, but he can stand up to it. I think that the fact that they've come out is, in a way, a good thing, because, you know, it was a pretty tense situation for them, and I would have been, I think, less happy as they would if they'd had to go up into orbit yesterday. So delay is frustrating, but I think it's had no effect on the mission with the overnight rest they've
Probably
had.
made worse by the fact that they were closest to the computer problem, but could do absolutely nothing about it.
Well, it was ironic. As a matter of fact, in this cutaway of the model we've got here, the avionics bay, where the computers is right here, underneath the flight deck. This is, in fact, the right-hand side there, because it's cut in half, the pilot.
Let me point you to the pictures that we were receiving from the satellite just a second ago, Jeffrey. Sorry to interrupt you. We appear to be up on the gantry of the spacecraft. This is the sort of view that we can see from that high up.
The auxiliary power units are ready to be started.
Auxiliary power units.
Minus 5 minutes, 15
Crucial
seconds,
stage, is it not? Because once they've got these going, it's almost certain that they will go.
That's right. Of course, they're in the automatic sequence that started at minus 9 minutes, and the gantry's moved away now.
5-minute point.
So the gantry is clear.
3, 2, 1, mark. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. We have had a go for APU start.
So it looks as if they are going to go this time.
This is a start sequence. The final chase plane is taken off from Patrick Air Force Base.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Jeffrey. Perhaps it'd be a good time to see if we can reach Kieran at the Cape for the latest exciting news. Are you with us, Kieran?
Yes, we now have a definite go for a launch. The auxiliary power unit has just been switched on. We are go for launch. I should tell you, by the way, that what's interesting here is how much the atmosphere has changed from Friday, before that launch was called off, at a time when everyone assumed that everything was going well. There was a real carnival atmosphere about this place. Oh, sure, there was tension, but there was a lot of smiling and laughing, confident expectation that very soon America would have something to smile about. But all that's been replaced today by a much more serious mood, and although the countdown has gone very well, the increase in tension now is impossible to miss.
Kieran, many thanks, many thanks. What was the view of the bottom of the engine showing us there, Jeffrey?
Well, that's the liquid hydrogen vent off. The oxygen comes out of the top of the big external tank, and that's just venting. That's perfectly normal at this stage.
So, frustrations and computers on Friday, excitement and expectation now. Less than 4 minutes to go, 4 minutes away from the start of a historic mission. What will it be like for the men who are now on board? Commander John Young took us through what he and Bob Crippen are about to experience.
Well, the Space Shuttle is a very different vehicle from the Apollo, and we think launch will be a lot more interesting from a crewman's viewpoint. Initial takeoff is characterized by the main engines starting up and reaching 90% thrust as the vehicle is sitting on the launch pad. And when they reach 90% thrust, the vehicle will heel over, 19 inches in the cockpit, we'll see a motion, and then it'll come back up straight, and as it gets back up straight, they'll fire the solid rocket motors, and it'll go up vertically. And it doesn't fool around like the Apollo did. It's got a very high thrust-to-weight ratio, and in 6 seconds, it's above the tower. In some 50 seconds, it's going supersonic. At the end of 2 minutes, it's at 150,000 feet in Mach 4.4 or Mach 4.5. And at the end of 8 minutes and 33 seconds, we're in orbit. So it's going to be a very interesting ride. Even so, the only...
We are 2.5 minutes away from that happening. So over to Cape Canaveral, to Kieran, for the build-up to the launch itself.
Yes, Mike. Excuse me. There are a couple of things to look out for, I should say, in the last few seconds before liftoff. 2 minutes now before the launch. When the main engines fire, the shuttle will stay clamped to the launch pad, despite their enormous power trying to wrench it away. Something like the power of 23 Hoover dams, according to the maker. Now, Launch Control wants to be sure they're working properly first, but they know as well that as long as the shuttle is held down, the engines are going to force the whole stack to bend or twang with the strain. Now, that'll only be a few inches. They'll feel it in the cockpit, but we won't see it from here. It'll take a few seconds to ease back into position, and that's when they'll light the solid boosters. They'll reach full power in just half a second. That's when they'll explode the hold-down bolts, and with all those engines firing together, we're going to see one heck of a lot of smoke and flames. As John Young said, it's going to clear the tower a lot quicker than the old Apollo ships. And you can imagine the noise that 6 million pounds of thrust is going to make as well. T-minus 1 minute, 20 seconds. Because of that noise, by the way, that's why the engineers are going to pour 300,000 gallons of water onto the pad 10 seconds before liftoff. That's literally to dampen the sound, to try and prevent too much sound vibration bouncing back off the pad and damaging the launch vehicle. T-minus 1 and counting.
Firing system for the sound suppression water will be armed just a couple seconds from now. It has been armed. T-minus 45 seconds and counting. T-minus 40 seconds and counting. The development flight instrumentation recorders are on. T-minus 35 seconds. We're just a few seconds away from switching to the redundant sense sequencer. T-minus 27 seconds. We have gone for redundant set sequencer start. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15, 14, 13. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
What a fantastic sight. Now at the speed of sound. And the cheering and clapping here all over the Cape.
Columbia, Houston, you're go throttle up. Roger, go throttle up.
Well, the astronauts have now passed the 19-mile mark. They can't use their ejection seats after this point if they should need to. I'm sure they won't.
Roger, Columbia on the nice ride. You're lofting a little bit.
Any second now the boosters will run out of fuel and we should see them go.
Columbia, you're negative C. That call up says that Columbia, the altitude is too high for ejection seat use.
Boosters are shut down.
Columbia, you're go for SRB step. 2 minutes, 4 seconds, standing by for SRB step confirmation. Roger on the step, Columbia.
And there go the solid rocket boosters. Forced away from the path of the shuttle by tiny rocket motors in the side of the two boosters. They, even without power, their momentum is going to carry them another 10 miles up before they parachute down to the Atlantic.
2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Incidentally, it's going to take twice as long to get down as it did for them to get up.
Kieran, thank you. You and Kennedy have done a fine job. We've lost the pictures of the SRBs, unfortunately. Let's look in animation then at what has just...
42 nautical miles downrange. Mark 2 minutes, 50 seconds. Columbia. Columbia, you're looking a little hot, and all your calls will be a little early. Okay. Columbia now has 2-engine rotor capability. Mark 3 minutes. Young and Crippen really moving out now. Velocity now reading 6,200 feet per second.
The next major call will be at 4 minutes.
15 seconds. Columbia now 51 nautical miles in altitude, 66 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 6,500 feet per second.
Well, that was the picture of the Columbia. It's not the latest picture. They had just to freeze it there because I think one of the cameras up top isn't working properly. But so far, it's a good liftoff.
Yes, it's been excellent. The trajectory is a little bit off, but you always expect a few dispersions. But in general, I'd say they're 99.5% on the mark.
And for a new machine.
And for a new machine. They just got a press to MECO, which means continue on to the main engine cutoff, so they've gone through most of their difficult parts.
Now, when the main engine cuts off, they've still got to use the maneuvering system to get into the proper orbit. Is that right?
Yes, yes. We'll hear their call here.
Flying forward, coming up on negative return. Press for MECO. Roger, press for MECO.
Press for MECO means continue on to the main engine cutoff, and that puts them in very good position at this point.
Mark 4 minutes 8. Columbia, stand by for negative return. Mark, negative return.
Negative return means that now they will not have to go back to the launch site, that they can continue on.
So they now do one orbit anyway.
Yes.
Capcom, Brandenstein, Columbia now committed to space travel. Young and Crippen can no longer turn around and return to the launch site. Columbia, Houston, we're showing both ohms PC transducers off scale high. Mark 4 minutes 45 seconds. The flash evaporator is activated on board to cool Columbia. Off scale low here.
Okay, sounds like they have an indicator problem.
Roger, stand by. We'll keep an eye on it. Mark 4 minutes 56 seconds. Columbia is lofting early in the second stage, is now being taken out of the trajectory as programmed. Columbia now 74 nautical miles in altitude, 181 nautical miles down. What a view.
They've just pitched down so they can see the horizon out the front window.
5 minutes 15 seconds. Columbia now 75 nautical miles in altitude, 202 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 11,000 feet per second.
We're trying to hold with them, but we can't keep the picture.
Status check and mission control by Flight Director Neil Hutchinson.
Indicator problems can come at any time.
5:30,
Yeah.
MECO, 8+34.
That says it.
Mark 5 minutes 40 seconds. That call up from Capcom Brandenstein says that Columbia's trajectory, navigation, and engine performance look good. Columbia, reading you loud and clear. Okay, you're clear, a little weak. Mark 5 minutes 55 seconds. Columbia, we just switched over Bermuda. Boys should be getting better here in a second. Roger that. Okay, that's good. 6 minutes. Columbia now 76 nautical miles in altitude, 280 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 13,000 feet per second. Columbia, Houston, could we have the cryo heaters, please? And Columbia, your single engine rota. Mark 6 minutes 25 seconds. That call up from Capcom Brandenstein says that if 2-engine failure occurred, Columbia is capable of an emergency landing at Rotor Naval Air Station, Spain. Mark 6 minutes 40 seconds. Columbia pitching over now, diving to increase velocity, decrease altitude, giving Columbia her most favorable attitude. Columbia now 72 nautical miles in altitude, 373 nautical miles down range. Velocity now reading 16,400 feet per second.
They need about 25,000 feet per second to get into orbit, so he's getting close.
Standing by for a single engine Presto Miko call up from Capcom Brandon Stein.
That call will mean they can get into orbit with only one engine out of the three they have.
So that's an engineering triumph.
Yeah.
Columbia, your single engine, Presto Miko. Mark 7 minutes 20 seconds. That report says that Young and Crippen can achieve orbital insertion even if two engines go out. Mark 7 minutes 30 seconds. Columbia 67 nautical miles in altitude, 485 nautical miles down range. G-force is building for Young and Crippen now up to 3 Gs.
And they'll reach about a maximum of 5 Gs before they get into orbit.
Mark 7
And
minutes
there's the cape at their left, and we'll be back.
Columbia's main engine slowly being throttled back now. Should be throttled at 65% at 6 seconds before main engine cutoff. Status check in the control center. Columbia, Houston, your go at 8. Mark 8 minutes 4 seconds. Looking good.
30 seconds to go.
Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 606 nautical miles downrange. Mark 8 minutes 15 seconds. Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 650 nautical miles downrange. Standing by now for main engine cutoff.
Launch control looked happy.
Oh yes, very.
Miko 25670 up at 220 feet per second.
Perfect. Perfect.
Roger, Columbia, Miko. Confirm shutdown. Columbia, the gem of this new ocean, now in space, not yet in orbit. Now standing by now for external tank separation.
Their parameters that Bob Crippen read out were very good.
Roger, we confirm the SEP, Columbia.
They have separated from the external tank.
3 seconds.
And that falls down in the Indian Ocean somewhere.
No, that will, yes, eventually, yes.
Columbia now performing an evasive maneuver, moving below and beyond and translating to the north of the external tank. Young should see it moving away out his window.
We should get a call from Young when he sees the tank, as they have now separated. And he makes a maneuver to get away from it so that when they relight their engines, the smaller engines, they won't run into it.
9 minutes 40 seconds, go, no go, status check and mission control for the first ohms burn.
That's the first burn of the smaller engines.
Columbia, Houston, your go for nominal ohms 1 and for APU shutdown on time.
That means their orbit is very good, no
Mark,
corrections are needed.
55 seconds. Columbia now maneuvering to its ohms 1 burn attitude. Using the 26,000-pound thrust engine, the ohms 1 will be posigrade, moving Columbia forward and higher on her flight path, placing Columbia in orbit. Standing by for ignition, 10 minutes, 22 seconds.
So with the Columbia well on her way, looking perfect, you were saying, Dave?
Oh yes, I think the numbers that Bob Crippen read down to us when they got into orbit were just excellent, just very, very good.
We'll just see the liftoff again. Wouldn't go on Friday, but went today as if there'd never been any problem at all.
America's first space shuttle, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
On the butcher for beef, normally it's not very fat. But
Had to be on a scene somewhere.
Oh, good, I'm glad you're there.
Well, sort of like the old times, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. A lot of people were asking about you on Friday down there.
Well, I had hoped to get down, but one thing and another led me to get here close enough in the studio so we could get first-hand reports of what's going on.
Great, I'm glad you're there with ITN.
Well, listen, I look forward to seeing you when we can get together soon.
Okay, Dave.
Here's Alistair back. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Jim Owen. We'll look forward to seeing you later on in the week. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, now, Jeff, now that the Apollo reunion is over, the engineering, in fact, worked terribly well, but there were problems, aerodynamic problems with getting all that kind of machinery up off the ground for the first time.
There are difficulties, but they didn't seem to be difficulties in the event. But the thing that the crew would have experienced just before liftoff was what's known as the twang effect. When the three main engines on the shuttle vehicle itself were lit, and they were lit about six seconds before the actual liftoff, they had the effect of pushing the whole shuttle structure about 40 inches in the direction of the tank. And then that movement had to swing back towards the vertical before they could actually lift off. That swinging back effect, augmented by the firing of the solid rocket boosters, is what was called the twang, but it didn't seem to worry them at all.
Fine. And it seems still to be going fine?
Yes, everything's going fine.
Except for unfortunate people in the Indian Ocean, a little bits of metal raining down on them, maybe, if that fuel tank doesn't break up properly.
Oh, yes, but it'll pretty well disperse, and it's in a very sparse part of the ocean.
Well, now, we'll have a look at the two astronauts, Young and Crippen, from earlier today. Here's Norman Reese.
500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and oxygen. At 2:25 a.m. local time, with the countdown going perfectly, launch controllers gave permission to wake the crew. So it was another pre-launch breakfast of steak and eggs for astronauts Young and Crippen. "Hello, Mum," Crippen said to the cameras as he faced his first trip into space.
The cabin pressure is...
Flight Commander John Young, the veteran of 4 previous space flights, was the first to test his helmet on the pressurized spacesuits the crew wear during launch and landing of the shuttle. The crew were relaxed and smiling as they left the suiting room for the 3.5-mile drive through the night to the launch pad. Then the trip to the top of Columbia and entry to the flight deck through the access arm on the left. If either of them were feeling any doubts, it wasn't showing, and Bob Crippen gave the final wave as he entered the spaceship.
Last sight of them for quite a while, perhaps as many as 36 orbits if all goes well. 54.5 hours the mission will be if it's a success, as it seems to be at the moment very much. Well, now, Geoffrey Archer, that's one of the most difficult moments over. When's the next difficult moment? Re-entry, I suppose.
Well, there are still some to come, but one of the critical ones is going to be re-entry. And one of the major problems in developing the shuttle has been the task of designing a heat shield which could be used 100 times as the shuttle itself is meant to be used. And the shield is necessary because when the shuttle orbiter comes back into the atmosphere, it comes in at a speed of about 16,000 miles an hour. And a tremendous amount of heat is built up, mostly on the underside of the craft, going up to a temperature of about 1,500 degrees centigrade. Well, they came to the conclusion that the best way to deal with that was to arrange a system of tiles to cover the shuttle. And these tiles are made of a silica fiber material, which is very heat resistant. And there are about 31,000 of them altogether on the shuttle. This is one of them here. It's one that was designed for one part of the shuttle but didn't fit exactly. It's very, very light in weight. You can see this silica fiber material underneath, and it's coated with a ceramic material. And that we hope those tiles will stay on when the orbiter comes back into the atmosphere, because otherwise the craft itself could be damaged.
But it's a reassuring moment at the moment. After all the delays, years of delay, in fact, that hiccup on Friday, you were very philosophical about it, Dave. Well, now, a triumph.
Yes, and I think it's really a spectacular launch for a first flight. You have to remember that this has never been done with a winged vehicle before. And to have the success in the orbital parameters, or that is where they are in orbit now, on the first flight is just spectacular. I think it's a major achievement for them.
Indeed, it's probably better than some of the early systems were in their first flight. I mean, much simpler ones.
Definitely. As a matter of fact, it appears to be better than some of the early systems were on their later flights.
And you speak with experience of that.
Well, yes, it was difficult to hit the precise orbital parameters that they've hit. And again, you must remember we have a winged vehicle going up there. So I think it's a real achievement.
So what do you think now? You think they will try to go for the full 36 orbits?
Oh yes, definitely. I think it's in good shape. There are no major problems. There are no little problems even that I've heard. And I think they'll go all the way through the 54 hours, and we hope to see a super good landing too.
And this is therefore the start of really quite a big step out there in space. Now, the Russians are up there. They've had a craft up there for a month now, and there was talk earlier today that they might be sending somebody else up in order to steal some of America's thunder. That hasn't happened.
No, and we must remember that they're dealing with equipment that was designed and developed years ago, and now we're taking another step into the cutting edge of technology with a vehicle which will enable us to really exploit space and utilize it properly.
And the next shuttle then is what, 5 months from now?
If all goes well on this one, yes, approximately 4 or 5 months.
If all goes well with Columbia, as it seems to be doing right now. Well, I suppose Columbia might have been called the reluctant debutante on Friday afternoon. It was the computers, not the craft, that went wrong. And computers have gone wrong before, but all goes well now. And we'll be giving you reports of how Columbia is getting on through the day on ITN News. So that's the flight of the Columbia, the first true spaceship, the Space Shuttle, now well on its way. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming in. Thank you. Very good.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start.
America's first space shuttle. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Because of that special programme from ITN covering the launch of the Space Shuttle from Cape Canaveral, we'll be showing numbers at work at a later date.
The shuttle is all ready to go at exactly
summertime.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
And it all went perfectly. Astronauts Young and Crippen have now put the shuttle into orbit. They're due to go round the Earth 36 times and carry out various tests before returning to Earth at about 7:30 our time on Tuesday evening.